So tomorrow's election day, and here in Pennsylvania, there is a big race coming up tomorrow, and that is the race for Pennsylvania's Supreme Court. So there are 3 seats that are up for election that candidates are vying for, and in this article on Philly.com, written by Chris Palmer, who will join us in just a moment. It says that basically this is the first time that this has happened, that this setup of 3 justices being ready to be up for re-election, first time since a British monarch ruled the state of Pennsylvania.
Wow.
Which is crazy.
Making history.
And so then someone in the article, Kyle Kopko, who's a political science professor at Elizabethtown College, said that it's probably the most significant race in recent memory. So now to discuss this race further is Chris Palmer. And Chris, thanks for joining us here on Rational Radio.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So, Chris, talk a little bit about what you've seen as being the biggest kind of implication of this race, 3 seats up for re-election here.
Yeah, so the state Supreme Court only has 7 seats. And so when you're electing 3 people, you're essentially electing half of the Supreme Court justices. They have 10-year terms, so you're electing people for a long time. And there are 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats currently on the bench. So whoever gets elected this time is going to determine the balance of power, whether it's Republicans or Democrats on the bench. There are topics that are likely to come before the court in future years, including whether a moratorium on the death penalty is legal, whether Kathleen Kane should remain in office, fracking, whether natural gas drilling is legal in the state of Pennsylvania, and legislative redistricting, which determines where our congressional representatives and our legislative representatives in Pennsylvania, where their districts lie, which has a long way of going to determine how gridlocked politics can be. So these justices are going to have a lot on their plate to determine. It's going to affect a lot of Pennsylvanians. And again, electing 3 people out of the 7 seats for the first time since 1703, I mean, this just doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, no, definitely something that we have not seen.
Yeah, haven't seen in many generations.
Yeah, but in talking to people, Chris, is there a sense of wanting to change up the balance of power right now? Because I know it is a Republican majority. Do people want to see more Democrats come onto the bench, or are they happy with the Republicans that are in the race?
You know, I think if you talk to the justices, what they say is that their party affiliation actually has nothing to do with how they rule. It's a weird system in Pennsylvania and in other states, too, where we elect justices based on their political party, but then we ask them to sit on the bench and put that party affiliation to the side and not rule in a partisan manner. I think one thing you can definitely see is that there are judicial philosophies that are influenced by their political party. You can see some justices, Republicans, for example, may have a more strict reading of the Constitution, whereas Democrats may be more willing to look at it as a living document and interpret it as it currently stands. But, you know, we see in judicial politics all the time that party affiliation doesn't necessarily determine how someone's going to vote.
Yeah.
Chief Justice John Roberts on the U.S. Supreme Court, for example, is a Republican who was, by most accounts, the vote that determined that Obamacare was largely legal. So it's a weird system we have where we elect justices based on their political party, but then most will tell you that they're not affected by that when they sit on the bench.
We're on the phone with Chris Palmer talking about the new PA Supreme Court race that will be Election Day tomorrow. And just, Chris, I have another question. Since this hasn't happened where 3 seats are up for availability in over 300 years, do you see any negative side effect to this, that we have 3 new people jumping into the loop right away, not having much experience in the Supreme Court of PA? So do you see any downside to this at all?
Obviously, there's always unknowns when you have candidates that are going to run, and I think one of the things that election watchers are worried about is that the turnout tomorrow is expected to be pretty low. In an off-year election, you generally get about 25% of the voters who come out and pick. You know, that isn't always the broadest representation of the actual electorate. So certainly there's consequences. I think that's why it's important for everyone to get out and vote. I would encourage all of your listeners to
Definitely.
Do some last-minute homework if they need to, and get out to the polls tomorrow and make their voices be heard. I think, again, there's always potential consequences, but having 3 justices, it's historic. I think it's hard to say whether it's a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah, so I know here in Philadelphia, at least, I've seen lots of ads being run for Kevin Dougherty. Have you, from what you've done, from your reporting, does he seem, is there a favorability behind him to push him onto the Supreme Court?
So I haven't seen any independent polls that suggest who's in the lead or not. Obviously, Dougherty has really strong ties in Philadelphia because his brother is John Dougherty, Johnny Duck. He's the leader of one of the most powerful labor unions in the city that has a lot of political connections within Philadelphia city politics, within state politics, even on congressional level. Dougherty last week, Kevin Dougherty, had all 12 Democrats on Philadelphia City Council come out and back him. He held his reception in the Philadelphia mayor's office, although I don't believe Mayor Nutter or Jim Kenney, the Democratic frontrunner for mayor, were there. But it just shows that Kevin Dougherty and the Dougherty family has a lot of institutional backing in Philadelphia. That's probably why you see his name around a lot in the city, just because of those familial ties that are go very deep in city politics.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, probably the most ads I've seen so far are for him. And, I mean, I think it's just really interesting to look at this and see, there could be, with 3 new justices that come on, there could be a change in that political ideology, especially with everything that's been going on with Kathleen Kane at the moment. Seems like lots of people are eager to do something about that issue. But I mean, also, there's lots of other issues that are important here to the people of Pennsylvania. And I don't know, Chris, if people really see this race as something like, oh, whatever, Supreme Court, it doesn't affect me. Why should I go out and vote?
Right. I think a lot of the questions that end up in front of the Supreme Court are the big questions that you might not think about, again, with issues like whether the death penalty is. The moratorium on the death penalty is going to be able to stand, whether natural gas drilling is going to be able to continue in the state, and again, how our political map is drawn up in Pennsylvania. You might not think as a voter that you have a lot of direct control over those types of issues, but they affect a lot of people. And the court, frankly, hears some of the biggest societal questions that we have. The cases that get in front of the Supreme Court are by definition the ones that no one else can decide. And so it's important to have people who the voters want and believe are qualified to sit in those seats and decide those big and important meaty questions.
Yeah, and I think, just looking at the people who are running for Supreme Court, lots of them have the experience as judge. It's not like a ton of, outsiders to this. A lot of them have been either common pleas judges or another judge, a Superior Court or Commonwealth Court judges, which I think is a benefit.
Yeah, they're all judges. So there's no question there that they have sat on a bench before, and there's no doubt you're not electing someone who's gone to an online law school for a few years and now is launching a campaign. These people all have judicial experience, and one of the things they're all touting this election cycle in particular is their integrity and their respect for the law, because the Supreme Court over the past few years, the state Supreme Court has been ensnared in a whole list of scandals. There have been 2 justices who have been implicated in a pornographic email scandal. There was another who was kicked off the bench for corruption allegations, and that's all within the past 3 years. So all of these justices, beyond kind of touting their judicial qualifications and their years on the bench, are seeking to kind of place an emphasis back on integrity so that they can separate themselves from the scandals that have kind of ensnared the court over the past few years.
Yeah, so we shall see how it turns out tomorrow. But, Chris, thanks so much for joining us here on Rational Radio.
Thanks for having me.
All right, bye-bye. So we shall see I mean, it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, and
tomorrow.
I mean, Chris made a good point. It's our civic duty to go out and vote. So make sure, all you listeners out there, make sure you go out. And like Ryan said, you might not think that the Supreme Court race is not something that you should definitely be, concerned about, but it is. This plays a huge role in our state here. So get out and vote, make your presence be known, and do the American thing and vote. I'll leave it at that.
Well, yeah, because I think lots of people look at the Supreme Court and say, this doesn't affect. I mean, I'm a law-abiding citizen. What does it matter what they decide? No. But hey,
it could directly impact.
It could, yeah.
There's $10 million being pumped into the race, so you might as well go and vote. They're putting a lot of money into it.
Yes, exactly.
And there's, like he said, there are things that the Supreme Court decides that nobody else can decide.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, I think that just speaks to kind of like the prestige of it. It's not, not every case reaches the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm. They're big cases,
right? The death penalty, like the future of the death penalty.
And if that's something you feel strongly about, then you need to go out and vote.
Right? Exactly.
And not only you'd be making history, you're voting for something that, there's a new thing going on, almost hasn't happened in 300 years. So if you want to be a part of history, go out and vote tomorrow.
Yeah, but I think too often in today's society, I think that people are just like, it doesn't matter, whatever. But like you said, it'll be. I'm really interested to see if Kevin Dougherty gets elected to Supreme Court, just because of all the power that his brother has here in Philadelphia, and see if that can push him to election on the bench. But it is. Looking through the judges on here, it's Superior Court judge, Commonwealth Court judge, Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas judge, Adams County Common Pleas judge, and it's good to see. It's not just they've been on the bench for 2 years. They're all
they all have experience,
right?
They know
exactly. Their ages range from the low 50s to the late 60s. And it's not their first day doing this.
It's not their first time around the block, that's for sure.
No, which is good.
Yeah, which is definitely good. They're going to have experience behind them. They're going to be able to handle tough situations. They've been on the bench before. They know how to make those tough calls. So,
and I think people honestly need to look at the issues and vote on this, because in the coming future there will be issues that will be polarizing here in Pennsylvania, and if people then don't vote and then complain, you can't not vote and then complain about the issue.
You have to have some part of it to make your complaint valid.
Right, exactly.
And that's part of that's what I see as part of the whole big problem with America right now. A lot of people just say, politics has nothing to do with me, but then they want to complain about everything.
Yeah.
Then no, make a contribution and then tell me your opinion, and then I'll see it as valid.
Yeah.
Politics has everything to do with you if you live in this country.
Exactly. But
everything
so many people out there,
you.
they don't even know who's running for president right now, and that's part of the reason. Those are the people that go out and just vote to vote, and they don't know what's going on, and that's why we get bad officials in office.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how this race turns out tomorrow.
It will be.